But if we get like a small percent of people to move in a certain direction towards more compassion, empathy, and understanding, I think it's going to make the world a better place. And that's why it's my pin tweet.
You can say that here.
Every small action creates a ripple.
You can disagree with someone without putting them down. You can listen to understand instead of listening to refute. Build bridges of understanding, not chasms of divide. So check your bias, your assumption, and your fear, hate, and ignorance at the door. Welcome, Bobby Umar, the author of this quote, who you stole me. You had me at hello on Twitter with that when I read that. So welcome to our podcast, Bobby.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Well, I want to do a proper introduction. Might be a novice at this, but still I can bow down, and I'm so honored to have you here in our presence. But for anyone who doesn't know Bobby Umar, he is one of the most prolific heart-based leaders in North America. And anybody who knows me knows that I am all about leadership, leading with your heart and taking care of your team. So his story, his profile, his business really, really resonates with me. Inc. magazine named him one of the top 100 leadership speakers, named alongside, mind you, some noteworthy giants like Richard Branson, Brene Brown, and John Maxwell, all personal heroes. He's an excellent storyteller. We've watched all of his TEDx speaking gigs. We're pretty impressed by all of them. And in general, a very funny guy. And what I am most looking forward to today, besides talking about cancer culture with this man, is learning about discovering your personal brand movement. So, Bobby, welcome. It's so nice to have you here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
So I'm going to start off, I'd like to start off a little hard hitting. We don't normally do a lot of interviews, but that I'm kind of in awe of this message that you're delivering. It's bringing people together is not something that's happened. And that's why we created this podcast. But on your LinkedIn profile, you wrote, every person has a story, a purpose, and a legacy. What's yours?
Well, for me, it's,
you thought we were going to joke and talk about
Well, the one that I talk about a lot is being a lost leader. So feeling lost in my career because I followed a path of success defined by other people, right? So, people said, do this, and my parents said, do that, and society says, do this, and, bosses and corporations say, do that. And, after trying different things, brand marketing, engineering, teaching, performing arts, it was hard for me to figure out what I wanted to do. And finally, I decided, let me figure this out on my own, dive my brand. And then I came up with some things that made sense to me. Bobby loves people. Bobby loves persuasion influence. Bobby loves to nurture and support people. Bobby loves diversity. Bobby loves to perform and entertain. And so based on those 5 kind of branding elements, I decided to become a motivational speaker. And I started that 17 years ago, never looked back. It's evolved over the years, and certainly the pandemic changed things too. But for the most part, that's the main thing that I do, and I love what I do. So for me, my story is about, it's okay to feel lost, it's okay to feel stuck and unfulfilled. It's not okay to do nothing about it. Ask for help, do what you can, dive into yourself, and forge a path that makes sense to you so that you can feel more empowered, more fulfilled, and create that impact in the world that you want.
I love that. When you talk about your legacy, what legacy do you hope to leave?
Well, the number one legacy is my children, right? So helping them grow, and it was just Father's Day the other day, so I'm always thinking about that. Helping my kids grow into global, productive, caring, loving citizens of the world. It would be something that would be meaningful to me. I think that's probably the greatest legacy I'll leave. If they have kids or whatever, that's to me the biggest one. And the second one comes from my work in terms of, who do I inspire? Who do I move to action? Who do I change and influence in a positive direction? That's the legacy too.
Do you think? Go ahead, Andy.
The pandemic must have been especially hard for you, Bobby, in your business, because I think you were doing a lot of stand-up talks, and I'm certain that a portion of your income, at least, is derived from hugs. So I don't know. Like, the pandemic could not have come at a worse time, right? You're on this trajectory, and I loved your message. I actually watched the TED Talk where you talked about hugs. and I'd never seen anybody talk about hugs before, but I'm not unfamiliar with the concept, though I would not describe myself as a hugger. I definitely respect people that are, and I was really looking forward to talking to you today about how that could, what's the new version? Like, what did you pivot to when hugs became verboten?
Well, it's interesting, that talk that I did, I was also trying to speak to people who also were not huggers. I was like, well, if you're not a hugger, where can you help people? And that's why I said focus on orphans, focus on people who are widowed, because they lack that skin touch, and it's really important for them to have that. And that's a generous way of being a human being. And then, I think the other thing I talked about was the Me Too movement, where, now as someone who's a super hugger, because I'm a large man, I have power and privilege. And so now, I remember a few years ago at an event, a friend of mine, we were connected on LinkedIn, we're talking to each other, and we finally met in person. And I went and hugged her, and I was like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And so now I never hug first. I make it very clear that I'm open to them, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But I never initiate.
It's funny
when I'm with women.
Well, it's funny when that's one of the first questions when I get a new business owner that joins Small Business USA. One of the first questions I get is, "Can you help me navigate our environment right now? Can I hug? Can I tell somebody they look good? What can I do?" There's this real fear, like we're stopping people from being who they are authentically sometimes. So I like that you said, I let them know I'm open to it. But we're dating in tricky times. Right?
Yeah, but I think at the same time, like, and this is it goes into the whole topic around what we're talking about today, which is we're all evolving, learning, growing as people. One of my friends on Twitter just today talked about pronouns, and saying that it's not that big of an ask. Mm-hmm. And for me, like, people want support on something, and it's important to them, and they tell me, of course I'm going to support them, or at least do the best I can. I've now been getting into getting people to say my name properly, because I, as a brown person, have been mispronouncing my last name for years, because it was my professional name. But I realized I should be saying my name the way it's supposed to be pronounced. The challenge is most people can't say it. No, it's okay. It's Umar, but most people can't say it. I call my wife Ananda Umar, Niall Umar, Raya Umar, my kids, but I always say Bobby Umar, but I shouldn't. It's Bobby Umar, or Rayhan Umar is my first name. And so, but at the same time, I don't expect people to, there's some people who genuinely want to try. I respect that. And then when they can't do it, I let it go. And that's fine. I really appreciate that. So I think even just doing a little bit, trying to evolve as people, because that's what's happening. A lot of people are like, well, I'm not do this, I'm not do this, I'm not do that, I'm not do this. And it's like, well, yeah, okay. But, we also, if you compare ourselves to 500 years ago, we also have to do 10,000 things when it comes to technology or dressing and brushing your teeth with the sonic toothbrush. And, back then they just had a piece of wood. And so, things have changed. Life's more complicated for sure, but we're trying to do it because we're evolving and growing as people, whether it's societal cues or whether it's, other things, technology.
Is that true that people used to brush their teeth with a piece of wood?
Well, I know, like, when I was in Pakistan 20 years ago, they have this thing called maswak, and it's basically a certain type of wood that people would use that had little qualities that make their teeth a little bit cleaner. It's certainly not as good as toothpaste, right? But it certainly it's something they would do.
I guess I never thought about it beyond, like, life expectancies being so short before modern medical care and antibiotics and things like that. I never thought about it, except I figured that teeth were probably killing most humans in, very
possibly
young age.
Yeah.
And now, I never thought about whether they brush their teeth or not.
Believe it or not, there's this new movement out there to not brush your teeth with toothpaste, because the toothpaste throws off the natural antibodies that are in your mouth. And if you only brush with water, that it will your body will take care of itself. I mean, I don't make this stuff up. I just read about it and repeat it. I'm like a big parrot.
Sounds like big fluoride talking.
I think the trick is, are you driving your behavior based on what people are saying and then finding some sort of evidence or narrative to support what you're doing, or are you looking at the evidence and what's coming out there, and then based on that information making an informed decision? Because I think that some people do one way or the other, or a mix. But and it comes in every single area of life.
That's a great call. I did fast forward that video to just hear if they had bad breath. Like that's what I really cared about. Hey, so let's talk about cancel culture, because I think it is like, let's define it for anybody who doesn't know. Like, what does that mean to you, Bobby, right now?
Well, I mean, I think cancel culture is from what I've seen is that it's an organized effort by a group of people to uh, not just call out somebody for their behavior, but also to, cancel them in a more significant way, to strongly affect what they're doing, and really, I guess, take them off their pedestal or power or privilege that they have. So oftentimes, it happens to, well, the obviously a really good example, J.K. Rowling, of course, because she's been saying a lot of things over and over and over again, and a lot of people are very, very upset about it. So they're trying to cancel her by telling people not to go see the movie and not buy the books and things like that. It also happens to, individuals as well who are, let's say, not famous, who are canceled because of, some sort of reprehensible behavior that they made. But the idea is to, negatively impact their income or negatively impact their lives or restrict their movement or capacity to do more harm. And so there's this idea that we want to try to cancel them. Although the truth is, nothing. Cancel is like free speech. Nothing's 100%. You can't. It's very hard to cancel someone 100%. Even Mel Gibson's making movies in Europe, and even Kevin Spacey, who had a lot of stuff going on to him, he was actually making movies in Europe because people were hiring him for stuff over there, even though it was canceled in North America.
What's interesting about the cancel culture to me is it's not necessarily reprehensible activity that you're going after. Yes, there's sometimes when I'm seeing things or people that are canceled, I mean, free speech, there's this line, and I'm like, okay, we have to be able to have free speech, but without free speech, we can't have conversation. But some of the things that are reprehensible, I think that word is kind of an interesting word because everybody has a different line for what reprehensible
it's the perception
means.
Of the person, right? So when I say reprehensible, person A thinks that's reprehensible, even though most of us like not really,
right?
But that person thought so. I mean, the people are offended, and they find the action or whatever is reprehensible, and so they want to act on it. Yeah.
We always talk about
that its perspective is varies from person to person.
We always talk about a pendulum swinging back and forth in business and our world. Like everything is a little bit cyclical. Like sometimes we go too far in one direction, and there's a lot of conversation about, are we a little too far on that sensitivity scale right now? And will it come back and center a little bit and go more towards the middle? Or is this the direction that we're going? Is sensitivity, is it only going to become bigger? And are we going to get more sensitive? Is this something that we need to embrace, or do you think we've gone over the edge?
Well, I think I look at the drivers, right? So when you look at the information age, the media age, digital age, right? There's just a voluminous amount of things out there. At the same time, social media has the opportunity to amplify just about anything. That includes information, that includes misinformation, that includes people who are upset, people who are not upset, people who are defending that. And so I think that is a big challenge. Now, can society and people and groups and kids and whatever, and even adults who struggle, can they move along with the advent of this technology and shift at the same rate in which it's getting bigger and more expensive? That's a really challenging question, right? So I think that to me is something that comes into play in my mind. But so, are people more sensitive? I would argue, sure, because we're also more informed. We also have a lot of information out there that's both good and misleading. And so I think, and we're having trouble maybe processing some of the stuff. So now we have to figure that out, because now we have things where people you give them information and they completely reject it. And it's like, okay, now, so how do we have a conversation about that? Like I wear my seatbelt, but I'm sure someone could show me some data. Here's an example where seatbelts don't work. Okay, good to know. There's thousands of other ones where they say they do work. At what point do I start to believe the other thing? If you just hammer it home on me all the time, and then the next thing you know, I'm rallying against seatbelts. So yeah, I think it's a very complicated question that I don't think has simple answers. But I think the general thing I will say is that society is moving in many ways faster than most of us can keep up. And so I think that's going to be probably our biggest challenge for this generation.
So
incredible amount of information. Like when people are overloaded with information, this is why you see so much confirmation bias, because you have no time to sort it out. You have no time to actually fact check for yourself. And so you resort to what you want to be true. And that's where you see all this, retroactive thinking, as you described before. Such an incredibly important point. Like, do you decide what you want the outcome to be and then make the facts fit? Or do you actually, if something is important enough to you to research it yourself? Or do you have a few sources that you trust? Like, what do you do? There's so much information out there, yet free speech is incredibly important to the discourse. You have to allow it. You have to put up with bad speech in order to get the good speech. One of the consequences that I see of these petty things apparently drawing this huge amount of ire on the internet is people that normally would ask a question that might enlighten someone else will not do that. They won't speak up. You see it a lot in the workplace too. People just will not. Workplaces have become so incredibly sterile because there's no real discourse happening. Everybody's just, I just need to get through the day without pissing somebody off. I can never.
Too afraid.
Yeah, as long as if I'm talking, I'm running the risk of offending someone.
Yeah, and what's interesting too, and I'm going to nerd myself out a little bit more. So I saw there was an episode of Star Trek Voyager, okay, and it was an episode where 709 gets all the data information of the entire history of it into her head, into her brain, and in doing so, she was able to start coming up with dozens of conspiracy theories because there was so much information that she was able to link things together, and it started making her go crazy. And that totally relates to now the world we have now. It's like, oh my God, like I watched the episode. I think everyone should watch that episode because you'll get it. Like, okay, I can see why people do this or why I might do this. And I think it's important for us to have that understanding.
Yeah, there's a couple reasons why people, come up with conspiracy theories or buy into them. It's because A, there's an actual conspiracy, or B, there's just not enough information to fill in the gaps. So they invent a story to fill the gaps.
And the big reason why people like conspiracy theories too is because it gives them a sense of power. Aha, here's what I know that you don't know.
Yep.
And a lot of people were feeling fearful or fearing abandoned or feeling helpless or struggling. It gives them a sense of false power. But that's another reason why conspiracy theories are so powerful.
It's interesting because we invite conspiracy theorists to dinner because they're party favors. They entertain the crowd. No, I'm kidding. There is this piece though that there is some, you can get sucked in pretty easily because they're so entertaining, and it's mind-blowing to hear how somebody can pull this information together from what they hear and come up with some theory that is just kind of, maybe it's on the rails, maybe it's off the rails. But let me ask you this, as fathers, right? Both of you are fathers. Let me ask you this: when you send your kids out into this world right now, cancel culture, do you tell them to speak their minds?
Yes. I mean, sure. I mean, I always tell my kids to, if they see something that's, bad going on, someone's being bullied or something that you think is unfair or unjust, you just speak up. At the same time, that's also with the whole idea of, speaking with respect and speaking in a way that, doesn't, and because my kids are also very, my wife and I are very, really big on teaching them about social justice. We talk all the time at dinner tables. So they're very, especially my 11-year-old daughter, she's far more aware about a lot of these things than I think most 11-year-olds. And she calls out some of her friends for some of their rhetoric, and and I'm glad she does that. I think that's great. And I think at the same time, we're also teaching them about empathy and understanding and supporting people and being inclusive, and how do we navigate those types of things. And the kids have already dealt with bullying and toxic behaviors, even amongst their age group of 11 and 13. It's actually quite shocking sometimes what they get more than what we get, because again, they're in the information age, right? My 11-year-old daughter is on a Discord channel talking to a bunch of her people, her classmates, and some of them are acting like really, really terrible and saying horrible things. Like, oh my gosh, I never had that growing up, and this is what she deals with. And she laughs it off because she's actually quite mature for it. She's like, no, I'm just calling him out and letting him know. I'm like, gosh, you're just 11. Like, what was I doing when I was 11? I don't know. Oh my gosh.
We were brawling in the playground when we were 11. Now they brawl in Discord.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a caveat associated. I asked a question because I wonder if there's some caveat associated with fear. Like, do you, is it, there's sensitivity. I love that. So go speak your mind, but be sensitive and empathetic.
Well, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, so, as a brown man, I have to think about my kids being mixed and what that's like. There was a report that came out in Toronto just a couple of days ago about how the police did a study, and they're 230% more likely to act more violently against Black people than white people. And so I now, because of that, we think about our kids, and they're going out there and they have to navigate this complicated world. So that's something I have to teach my kids about in terms of that. And I read a tweet just earlier about, good fathers for daughters, teaching the women, their daughters, how to handle, toxic men out there. And that's something they have to have a conversation about. And so, it's certainly something I think about. But I think, for the kids, depending on what age they are, it's kind of like, graduated sex ed. There's little things you say when they're 5 and when they're 10, and then when they're 13 and 16, the things will change in terms of what you tell them and to what depth. So I think that's important too, to tell them and let them know about these things for sure, so they can protect themselves.
Yeah, right now, my daughter's 10. We're struggling with the difference between, being truthful, which is always saying what you believe to be true, and yet somehow excluding the dinner table from that. When grandma makes something that she doesn't like and doesn't want to eat, there's polite ways of saying no, thank you, instead of no, that's disgusting. So, she got the message on that one pretty quick, because just grandma. But that's the struggle that we have. It's like walking. Now she's got to try to understand where that line is between being polite and speaking her mind.
And there's truth and not hurting people's feelings. Right. But at the same time, my daughter struggles with truth and making her parents upset and angry.
Yes.
So she's lying in ways that would upset us. So she won't tell us that she's lying, but we sometimes catch her, and that's something that she's struggling to figure out, because it's always different balance they have to figure out.
And they have to have that particular kind of empathy where you know the difference between a harmless lie, or maybe some people would argue there's no such thing, but where you're not arguing with, or you're not saying exactly what's on your mind. You're finding a better way to say it to preserve the decorum in the conversation.
I had a child psychologist, and maybe this goes into the whole cancel culture, kind of the conversation goes full circle. But I have a friend who's a child psychologist, and he said, when our children do those things, it's really about control. As they mature, they're trying to control their own life, control their narrative, and break away from us as parents. So that's why you constantly feel that friction. And I mean, ultimately, isn't cancel culture really about control? Like, is it shutting down some narratives? Like, I think about the My Pillow guide, like, we didn't like his message, so he's canceled. So should we, I'm not necessarily an advocate for or against his message, but are we doing some damage by not listening? So Bobby, to what you said, can we listen to understand instead of listening to refute? Are we as a culture missing another side of a conversation?
Well, we can at first, but if people say things that are inherently wrong or disproven, then we have to call that out. And if they do it in a way that starts to harm things or people or groups or organizations or societies, then at the end of the day, we all take responsibility for our behavior and actions and what we say, right? So if I say fire on a plane, the consequences, I'm going to be kicked off the plane, right?
True.
In the movie theater. And so, I think people get really caught up in this whole the freedom thing being absolute, right? Mm-hmm. Free speech and freedom of the press and all these different, all these, the Second Amendment and all these different things. Like, there's no such thing as they're not 100%. There's always limited. There's always some sort of restriction on these things, because I mean, I don't believe in free speech where a person should be allowed to yell at their child and cause emotional damage. You can't do that. There are repercussions for that type of behavior. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people, forget about that. But as long as we take responsibility for what we say, then if I say something that's very, very hurtful and really bad, then I mean, because I tweeted this morning, like, can I be canceled? Yeah, it depends. And someone said, depends what you say. Absolutely. I can think of multiple things to say right now to cancel myself.
Right.
But I don't, because I'm thinking about it and realize, well, that's wrong. I shouldn't say that. And I won't say it.
I'm literally nobody online. I rarely ever post anything. I haven't used it. I'm not trying to use it to make a living or to build a brand yet. I may reserve the right to do that at some point. But from where I'm sitting, it looks to me like the more of an ally you are to certain online groups, the more you think you're doing all the right things and saying all the right, having all the right messages, the more likely you are to get attacked. Lizzo is a great example. So I think we mentioned Lizzo before the call. Lizzo is squarely, I would say she's definitely a poster child for certain advocacy groups. Certain people think her music is great. Certain people love her image. Certain people love her message. And yet, if she makes a misstep, she got attacked the other day because she had the word spaz in her lyrics from a recent song. And so she got a message like, you can't use that word. Here's why it's hurtful. And she went and re-released the song. So she rewrote the song, re-released the song, like pulled back all the old copies, I guess, or took it offline, took it unavailable for streaming, and then made a new version of the song without the word spaz in it. This is a slippery slope to me, and it will never end. I don't think she or anybody else is ever going to pass that kind of a purity test. So go ahead and tell me what you think about that, Bobby.
Well, I think the first thing is that, she has power in terms of her money and her fame. And the fact that she listened to this person and she decided to make a change to support them, even if she didn't think what she did was wrong, or even if she, and who knows what kind of cost it was to her in terms of production and whatnot. But the fact that she did that, I think that's a good thing. I think that anybody who gets anyone, whether you're famous or not, gets told something and you listen to understand and you empathize and you try to make things better. I think that's great. The challenge is when everyone, the harder part of this whole situation was just everyone attacking for like, oh, I still can't believe you did that. Well, again, I can't take back the boneheaded things I said, yesterday, or the things I said 10 years ago. All I can do is learn, evolve, and grow as a person, and show that whether I'm improved from yesterday or improved in the last 10 years, I'm a better person, and I'm trying to be a better person every single day. And I think that goes a long way. And what's funny, a lot of people who are trolling her and getting on her case, I'm like, yeah, no one's perfect. They're casting stones, but next thing you know, they start fat shaming her, and they start, calling her a really bad thing. It was like, okay, you're completely missing the point.
There's a limit.
Yeah, well, because one of the things that also happens too with cancel culture is there's so much hypocrisy in this. The people who call this out and then their own behavior is doing the exact same thing or very similar things, they don't actually see it. So I think that's important. And the other thing that people don't realize is there's so much context involved in these things. It's not just a one thing or a binary thing or a black and white thing. There's lots of context involved in these different things. So a good example of that is actually my own tweet. Let's talk about that. I put it there and it went viral, and I talk about it a lot. It's a philosophy I firmly believe in, although it has evolved since I've posted. I think it's like at least 4 or 5 years old, but there are certain parts that have evolved about it. Someone chewed me out and said, well, I saw you tweet where you retweeted someone and they were calling someone names. You said, don't call people names. I said, okay, well, and I said, well, I never will call someone names. I will call them behaviors, but sometimes I retweet people and the crux of the message is mostly what I want to say. And yeah, they said someone was an idiot. I'm going to let that go. And again, because I'm not, 100% absolutist on everything. It's not the way it is. But they were just getting my case. I said, okay, well, listen, if you don't understand the context, or, if you look at all my tweets and what I share personally, it's not that big a deal. And then the other one that came into play was, what about, there's a time to be really, really angry. And, when George Floyd happened, my opinion changed.
Right.
It evolved. I was like, look, I totally understand people who want to yell and scream in anger because they are not being heard. And in that, again, contextual situation,
right,
all for it. You don't necessarily have to, in that moment, be trying to listen to other people to understand. And that goes back to the other argument, which is, sometimes so many people try to spend so much time meeting halfway, but there's some things that you can't meet halfway on, right? There's there's some things you can't say, no, we have to listen to that side because we have to listen to them. No, there's some things that you can dismiss. I mean, we want to bring in pedophiles and say, hey, let's hear their side, and maybe they can say why it's okay to do this. No, we've made a stamp in the ground that we are not okay with harming young kids. That's it. That's a line drawn.
That's
right?
the line. That's the line that is the current discourse on Twitter. That's what everything's right now. That's what it's all about. It started with the "Don't Say Gay" bill in Florida in this country. I don't know what's going on in Canada, but it started with the "Don't Say Gay" bill in Florida. It actually goes back a little bit before that, but now the drag queen story hours and the kids going to drag shows and the pride parades. That's where the moral battleground is right now. And I think the hard line is being drawn, that there's non-blue pride, and then there's blue pride. And what I mean by blue is sexualized. And that's the battle that I see going on. I'm not picking a side, but I'm certainly against the pedos.
Well, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I'm Canadian, so I'm watching what's happening in the U.S. And there's lots of aspects that are going in the other direction. I mean, at the end of the day, when I say listen, understand people, it's definitely focused on the privileged, listening and understanding those who are more vulnerable and marginalized, right? Like, do I need to listen and empathize with billionaires? No, not so much. I need to listen and empathize with people who are struggling, because there's a lot of issues for trans kids and a lot of issues for LGBTQ, and so they're marginalized. Women are marginalized. Ethnicities are marginalized, and so we have to be able to understand that. As a man, I try to support women and support LGBTQ as an ally as best I can, because again, my goal is to empathize and support them as best I can, because I've seen the data, I've seen what's happening out there, and a lot of people are getting hurt. And so when I see some of these laws, and it's like, well, these laws are going to hurt people, and they are they're laws that are based in fear, they're based in ignorance, and they're also based in power. And when you take fear and ignorance, there was actually a great meme out there about something like, it was like fear and ignorance, and it was a fire and a candle and it fueled hate, and it just led us. It was a great meme that explained how it all worked. But that to me is what's at play here. And it might be reactionary to have that law, because I mean, the "Don't Say Gay" law, I don't understand that at all.
Well, that was a hit job. The law was badly misrepresented, but I still think I don't believe in legislating these things away. I don't think you can. I think what happens is the belief on the political right now is to swing in the other direction, to be much more puritanical and to be less compromising, to make the people that would want to sexualize curriculum in K through 3, for example, what we call K through 3 kindergarten through, I know you know more about the states than I do probably, but the K through 3 school system, people that would want to sexualize content or curriculum in there, make them defend that idea, make them tell us why. So in other words, by passing legislation, you force a debate into the public square. What do you think about that? Is that legitimate, or is it just Puritans doing what Puritans do?
I mean, I understand the need to legislate certain things, but to me, I'm all about legislating things that protect people as opposed to restrict people.
Well, I think that the people that are passing that legislation believe it's protecting children.
Well, but again, it also depends on, how people perceive it, what the education says, what the research say, and things like that. I mean, for the most part, sex ed is something that I think is really important. Now, what does sexualization mean? Well, I think, again, just like what is reprehensible, it's going to be different to each person. Well, but when I think about my daughter, right, in grade 1, 2, and 3, what do I want her to learn or to know about? There's things that I want to know about that are different than what I want to learn about in grade 7, 8, 9. It's not
important that she learn about different sexual positions in first grade. And that's, I think, the stuff that's under attack here. So
Sure,
I think there's a bigger.
but the other question then is that exactly what's being proposed or not? Because when you look at people who, talk about things like critical race theory and whatnot, you'll see people, and even actually any issue out there, people, there's so much misinformation out there about what's going on. I remember one time, actually, so we had a sex ed curriculum in change here in Ontario, Canada, and there was a lot of huff about it, mostly from the religious people, whether they were very Jewish or Christian or Muslim. And I remember, because I'm Muslim, I went to this mosque for Eid celebrations, and there was someone handing out leaflets, and it had all the stuff, and it just wasn't true, but it was stoking the fear of the people that were there about all the things that all their kids are exposed to in the curriculum. I was like, have you read this thing? Like, I've read the curriculum. This stuff is not there, and yet she was passing stuff out all the time. So it's very, very difficult for us to navigate all this information of what's really in the curriculum, what's been said, what's not been said. Most of us haven't even read these things, but we just talk about it because everyone's talking about it.
Right.
Well, this is the biggest challenge that we have, I think. Are we really listening? But who wrote that pamphlet, and where are they getting their information? And it's so interesting. So I have an uncle an aunt who is in the legislature. She's a Democrat representative, state representative. I have my father-in-law who is a far-right conservative. When they visit and I look at their feeds, you can read the same exact story and really truly believe what you're reading is factual, and they are two different stories. So that pamphlet, somebody wrote that pamphlet and handed out that pamphlet at your celebration because they believe what was on there was true, right? And where does that information come from?
Well, Christians have been doing the same thing with the Bible for how long? There's a Bible in every hotel room.
Goodness sakes, here we go.
I mean, one thing I would say to her, like, if I could get her in a room and talk to her, the one who passed the pamphlet, and even people who have all these like theories about things, I'd say, number one, what would make you feel better? What would have to change to make you feel better about these things? And she said, well, if we can find out that this isn't there, I'd feel better. Oh, okay, great. Let's take a look.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Well,
this
is my challenge with cancel culture is people aren't having, I don't believe, or I don't see that people are having those conversations, and we need to have those conversations. Like, instead, when hate hits that page, when hate hits a comment, we stop listening to people. I think it's how we communicate and how we have that conversation that's really important. And that's where I would wish that the slide would, or the pendulum would just inch down just a little, and we can add in some positive intent and understanding in that conversation. Like, that person who was handing out that flyer thought she was doing something really good, I'm sure, even though it was misled.
And I often used to joke before, like 5 years ago, during the digital age, about this. I'd always see articles about, here's why A is bad, or here A is terrible, and then someone else would write an article 2 days later. No, here's why it's actually really, really good. And then 5 years later, another article. Actually, here's why A and B don't matter, and get over yourself. And that's how there's different articles about everything. And I find that really funny and amusing to a point.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead.
That's one of the rules of propaganda. So first, it's not happening, and then okay, maybe it's happening, but it's not that bad. Second of all, it's happening, but it's actually good for you. Those are basically the 3 steps of how propaganda gets mainstreamed. And the social media is just this huge amplifier for bad ideas.
Well, let me go back to what you said about the pendulum. I mean, so let's say the pendulum over here, and now everyone is talking about these things, and everyone's very sensitive about different things. I think that can still be a good thing. The issue is,
right. Yes, I agree.
If everyone's very hypersensitive to being good people and to supporting people and making sure marginalized people aren't being hurt or trampled upon, as long as we have methodologies and processes to discuss and learn and grow and evolve, then it's okay that we're over there. It's just being able to learn to grow together. And I think that what happens is, because of many influence factors like religion, like money, like power, these things can obscure what's going on, as well as the fear and the ignorance and all that kind of stuff.
So where's the line for you then? Where would you say a good line would be to where you've gone too far?
Well, in what sense?
Well, so in recognizing that historically marginalized people have had a rough go, and have had less privilege and power throughout their family histories. Maybe they haven't been given the same opportunities. They haven't been treated equally under the law, all those things. Where do you stop righting the ship? And I'm particularly interested in how you feel about, some of the stuff you talked about, diversity and inclusion, which I'm generally in favor of. But then when you get to equity, that's an interesting word.
Don't get me wrong. I don't think we ever stop righting the ship. Sorry, Bobby. That question was for you, but you got me mad.
I should have said pendulum because you're talking about a pendulum, right. But I'm talking about the same thing. So at what point do you say, oh, okay, maybe we've gone too far? Oh, you're muted, Bobby.
Yeah, because I was telling Alexa to be quiet. Oh. Well, I mean, so I guess the question is when does what go too far? The desire to correct things that people who are feeling oppressed are dealing with?
No, because I mean policy and legislation. So the real world stuff, not so much the discourse, but the real world.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to think an example of where someone who is marginalized or oppressed needs support from even legislation because they're getting hurt. It's hard for me to think of an example where it would be going too far, because if they need the support or need the help, then, and it's not happening through the natural course of people or society, then they need those protections. There's a reason why people ask for protections of things. And there's a reason why we passed child labor laws. There's a reason why we passed certain types of laws to protect people who are otherwise vulnerable and don't have a voice. So it's hard for me to think of an example where, well, that rule, or whether it's a company policy or even a legislative policy, is that one too far? To me, as long as it's protecting people who are very marginalized and broken and have been asking for this support or help, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, my thought is there's protecting and then there's overcorrecting. And to me, an overcorrection is something that goes beyond equal opportunity. So we can all look around and use our eyes in the real world and see that there's not equal opportunity yet.
I don't think we've even found that place yet. I don't even think we're close to equal opportunity. But I think
we're not.
There's this piece, Andy, and again, sorry, Bobby, but I think there's this piece. Like I do a lot of work with the city of New York, city of LA, and do in the early career development with underserved children. And you look at these kids who are smart, who are brilliant, who, man, they have the whole world right at their fingertips. They can have whatever they want. They just don't know it. They just don't feel heard. They don't feel like they belong in that next sphere. I think we have a lot of work to do in helping them see that this fake glass ceiling that they have over them doesn't exist. And we need to help them feel like they're heard and feel like their message is out there. And I just think we're so far away from helping them feel like they belong in that space. Now, I'm going to stop here because I know, Bobby, I interrupted. That question was for you.
No, I mean, obviously this is a good discussion and legislating things. I mean, there's you're right. I mean, we're so far away from having Black and Brown Latino people treated properly, and everything's so systemic. Women, there's things that are systemic. LGBTQ, there's things that are systemic, and it's very harmful. I mean, women go through stuff on a daily basis, dozens of times per day that I will never ever have to deal with, right? And it's just there, it's ingrained, and so it's really difficult. And you can't. Should we legislate no whistling at someone as they walk by? Okay, yeah, but at the same point, for the most part, it's really under, a company might say, well, we're looking for, respectful behavior toward people, and that's it. Right. And if you do that, you get reprimanded, and that's fine. But there's no legislation against those things. So we have to kind of find a way as communities, as companies and organizations to, model better behavior for people. But, so there's an example of thing you wouldn't legislate, but, we have to figure that stuff out. And I think there's a long, long way to go, because the problem with systemic stuff is that it's just so embedded. I mean, you talked about those people that are really, really smart, Colleen, but then And then what happens is, in their community, maybe someone dies, maybe someone loses a job, and all of a sudden they can't go to college for 4 years, and then it never happens, right?
Or
and it more likely happens in their communities than other communities. And again, until we have this inequity with money and society, then yeah, I think that's going to be another huge issue for people.
What's interesting is, if I think it has to go from both directions. Like, we need to help them rise from where they are, but I don't think it can all be corporately owned. Like, I'll give you an example using me as a woman. So in my past life, corporate America, there were times I had teams of about up to 5,000 people that reported under my umbrella. And, that's a lot of people. And when you get to see that many people and how they respond, when you promote them, when you interview them, when you ask them questions, you start to see that there's generalizations. And I want to take just women as one generalization. When people ask about the salary gap, I'm going to tell you that men, when they're promoted or get a promotion or get a job offer, always asked for more. I can remember one woman in 23 years. That's the women were happy to have it, felt they had a place. They were lucky to get that position. They weren't raised to ask for more, whereas men all asked for more. And it was nobody, like, there wasn't anybody in their circle, like of their mentors in where they worked in their office saying, hey, ask for more, men get more. Nobody said that. And there was nobody from the top down saying, hey, let's pay men more. But when somebody came back and said, hey, listen, you know what? I have a pretty good reason why I would like more money than you just offered me. We generally said yes. And it wasn't a gender issue. It was, are we like educating the women to get what they deserve, to believe that they can have what they deserve? I think it's a little bit of both that we need to work with in the society.
And what you talked about is what systemic is all about, right? Because it's ingrained in us. And even amongst our own selves, there's women amongst themselves talk about how, well, they would never do that. We should have done. Why are you doing that? Right. And even amongst myself, there are people, we're called apologists. I was a brown apologist many years ago for Apu on Simpsons. I was like, well, I don't really care that it was voiced by a white guy. Who cares? But then my other brown colleagues were like, no, here's why it's bad. Stop, don't be an apologist. Oh, and then I had to educate myself on that and learn. Okay, you know what? No, I think it's okay to call for that stuff. And now I'm telling people to pronounce my name properly, because I was doing this too, and it's ingrained in me because that's how I grew up. And it's fascinating to learn those unconscious biases that we have, and to then further try to let those things go.
I think there's a lot of evidence that would agree with your observation, Colleen. I think there's been a lot of psychological research that would agree with what you were seeing. And I think I wonder, I don't know, but if you took gender out of it and just tested for traits and then ran your study on pay gap, I wonder if it would line up more with traits or with actual gender.
I want to share another story, because I think this is something I very strongly agree in. And we talk about the sense of belonging, sense of, fairness. So one of my clients has two gentlemen, same age. I mean, they could be brothers, right? Like, there's not many differences between the two of them, but one has one agenda, the other has another agenda. And they both, were at each other's throats nonstop. Could not agree. It was destructive, not only disruptive, but destructive to the organization. And I really live by the motto, like President Lincoln said, I do not like that man. I'll have to get to know him better. That when we can combine them, when we can connect them and help them get to know each other better, that they can now work together, collaborate, hear each other's stories. Like, we have to at some point help everybody hear each other. And today, it's amazing what these two gentlemen are doing together, but it's, how do we do that today? How do we change if I was going to be idealistic and change the world and make everybody love and hug each other and be happy and listen to each other and work for solutions, how do I do that? I will now leave that question to the two of you before we wrap up.
Well,
I haven't written a book on the subject, so I'm deferring on this one.
My big hope, the thing I talk about a lot is empathy. right? And empathy is, and not everyone gets what empathy is all about, but what I would say is empathy is three questions. Number one, can I understand what you're feeling? And that's hard. And some people, 20% of people actually can't do that. They can't empathize. So that's already tough.
They think they can, but they cannot. I believe that wholeheartedly.
Yeah. There's a study that shows that 20% of people have no empathy, zero empathy. Right. Okay. So number one, can I understand what you're feeling? That's the first one. The second question is, can I understand why you're feeling that way? Now that's deeper and it's as understanding. The third one, which is the one that a lot of people forget about, is how can I support those feelings? Because if you truly want to be empathetic and you truly want to support people, understand people, you have to also be able to support those feelings with compassion, with action, with kindness, with all that kind of stuff. And so I think for me, empathy is the way to go. How do we increase that empathy, increase that understanding? Now, if people don't have empathy, then maybe there's a way to create more understanding. Maybe there's a way to create calls to compassion. One of my friends who says she's not very empathetic, she says she focuses on compassion as a tool, and she learned cues and she learned tactics in situations on how to be more compassionate, even if she doesn't entirely empathize with what's going on. And so I think that goes a long way to helping it. And then I think the other thing that comes to play is that you make the effort, and just like my pinned tweet, you make the effort, but at a certain point you have to make the courageous decision to let them go, or to distance yourself from those people, from that toxic situation, because there's only so much that you can do before it starts to hurt and harm you in terms of your efforts, and you need to create that space. And so I think those are the two things I would probably focus on.
And the Bible says it's to prune the limb. And I think it's the hardest thing to do sometimes, to just kind of make that, to bear more fruit, to have a stronger tree. Sometimes you may need to make those tough decisions to take those toxic people out of your life, take the people who are pulling on you out of your life. But even if they're haters, I look at so many people in toxic relationships, to just shut them off or block them on social media or not pay attention to what they're doing is one of the hardest things that they do in their life, or they're challenged with. They can't turn the other direction.
What if you can't understand? What if you can't understand why someone feels that way? You get stuck there. You consider yourself an empathetic person, but you're looking at somebody who's problematizing a situation that you yourself just cannot find the problem with.
That's a great question.
Then go to question 3. How can I help support you?
Right. And what if the answer is, well, I need you to fire this person that was mean to me, or that I perceive was mean to me?
Well, I think then you can take action on that.
Well, it depends on the person, what they did, but there's always things we can do to support them. So I'm saying if it's a work situation and they're like, well, I want you to fire them. Well, that's a little bit. Yeah, that's a strong thing, but it again depends if it's one person saying that, or if there's 10 people saying that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So you're getting stuck on number 2. So it's one person that's saying it. Colleen said something to me that upset me. I was afraid. I felt horrible. I had to go home. I had a headache. And the snowflake effect, for lack of a better term, when you honestly in your heart believe someone is not justified in feeling what they're feeling, those things, that must happen. I mean, everybody's feelings are their own. Not for me to say.
At a certain point, as long as you express what you said and you let them know. If they can't fire them, they can say, well, we will let them know. We'll reprimand them. We'll put on their record. You have to find ways to, and then the whole point is discussion with each other to come up with something that, the challenge with compromise is that they, both parties are kind of be a little bit dissatisfied and a little bit satisfied. And so I think that also becomes a challenge. But, I think, you can't, again, I don't believe that you should always just 100% do things a certain way, because there's a lot of context here, where there's a lot of variables at play. Right. I think that's important.
I worry when I asked before about going, when does it go too far? I worry about folks becoming overly fragile. That's what I really worry about. I worry about people. I work on a college campus, and I work I'm the director of facilities. So I'm on call all the time. And the last few years, the kids that have been coming in, who are in charge of the res halls, they're young, they're 18, 19-year-olds. they call me when there's a problem. They call me when there's water where there's not supposed to be water, or something is broken or whatever, and there's an emergency. I have begun adding it to my introduction to them. I might be the first and most disagreeable person you will meet. I don't think you're an idiot. I don't think you're a bad person. I like you very much and I want you to be successful. But just because I'm not happy that you're calling me doesn't mean that I hate you. And it's been very effective, because they call me, and because of the tone of my voice, and this is just how I talk, I can't help it. Maybe I could help it, but I don't want to. They go to their boss and they say, "Oh my God, I'm so scared. I don't want to call him," which, is not what I want, because if there's water where there's not supposed to be water, we should fix it. That may be a bit of a digression, judging by the crickets.
You left us speechless, Andy.
Yeah.
I don't know where to go with that.
So I worry that kids, in particular young people, are they need to be heard. They need to be listened to for obvious reasons. I just worry that we're not creating anti-fragile systems of discourse and anti-fragile people who can navigate when things get tough. I think.
Well, what I would say is that no matter how fragile or sensitive people get, and we recognize this, it's important for us to create support and systems that will help them, whether it's through critical thinking, whether it's through emotional mental processing, to navigate mental health days, whatever it might be, to help them with that. I think that to me, that's more important. If we are getting more overwhelmed as a society, or if we are getting more misled with information, that's why it's so important for us to have support for mental health, support for critical thinking, support for all these things. Yeah, I mean, again, that this whole idea that we might be all more sensitive, it could also be a good thing. We are more caring about things we're more caring about people who are struggling, and we're more caring about ourselves, and able to voice our concerns about what I'm going through. And I've been in a situation where people tell me things that I literally don't understand. It's true, I don't understand it, but it's not that hard for me to support them if they need something. And if it's something that I can't support to the extent that they want, then I'm say, look, I'm not sure I can do that for you, but would this help? And at least they feel heard, they feel listened to, as opposed to not. So I don't know where that's going to go, but I think at the end of the day, I'm always siding on the vulnerable. I'm always siding on support, and then finding a way for all of us to navigate this crazy world together by having conversations and dialogue.
I completely agree with that. I think the pendulum continues to swing in that direction, and it is a good thing because it raises a lot of important issues, and that's critical. I completely agree with you on that.
Yeah, things we never would have known. I mean, when my son was bullied, for 3 months in school, and I found out through another source, I was just like heartbroken because as a parent, it's like, I wish he could just felt to tell me, and I was so upset to hear that, right?
Yeah.
And so I like the fact that more people are talking about what's going on. And my daughter, she talks about trauma every day, but it's cool. So it's sometimes.
Wait, how old is she?
She's 11. She's 11.
Wait,
but
I have a 17-year-old. It gets worse.
But I'd rather know so that we can actually talk about it and see if we can process it together.
Yeah, so I hope this all leads to a more cooperative space on the internet. That would be a great thing to have, right? Where people are actually more empathetic with each other, more understanding, and can cooperate and agree on things. Because that was the purpose of this podcast. We were so thrilled to speak with you today because this is right in your wheelhouse, talking to people, and I hope I hope I will be more empathetic going forward. I really do. I struggle sometimes because I don't get it when people are upset a lot of the time, or what they're upset about.
Well,
so sometimes I get stuck on number one.
So I often say it's a muscle that you exercise, right? So the more you exercise that muscle, the easier it gets. So, I get a lot of haters on Twitter for sure. And this shirt is Papa Bear, right? So basically supporting everything, diversity, inclusion, all that kind of stuff. But supporting my kids too. And, I get a lot of haters now, but now it doesn't bother me much because I've been practicing the empty muscle for so long that, and not saying it doesn't hurt. Some things hurt. Absolutely.
Sure.
But I'm much better at processing, much better at being helpful. So what I'd say, it's a muscle that takes practice. Practice makes permanent. the behaviors, attitudes, and values and beliefs that you have. And the more you practice, the more permanent those will become in your overall personality and your leadership.
I love the story about your daughter on this discourse site, kind of sharing this. And I wonder if that next generation, they are so used to this open communication and tough speech that's out there. I wonder if they're going to have more grit than we ever had.
It's possible. I mean, we often think, oh man, they're so they're a lot of times, we always complain about kids. Oh, are they going to be able to handle the world? But then there's some things they handle better than us. So, I think it's gonna be a mix, right? There's gonna be some things that are gonna be obviously better than us at, and other things where they're gonna struggle. And I don't know what that's going to be, but I definitely think there's a mix of those things.
I think that whatever game theoretic Hegelian universe we're currently locked in, we need to figure out a way to solve it pretty quick. The challenges that are coming down the pipe are significant, and we lived through a little bit of it the last couple of years.
When I was digging into cancel culture, there was, there's what you see, but also there's a long, long history of cancel culture. And it blew my mind to hear that Dr. Martin Luther King was canceled. Like that just blew my mind.
They canceled him with a bullet.
Well, I mean, before they were, shutting him down and quiet, but he said something that was, I think, so valuable. And maybe we can end on after, he who is devoid of the power to forgive is devoid of the power to love. And I guess when I think about cancel culture, I love that if Lizzo can apologize for pretending to pinch Harry Styles' butt in a video and can come back into good graces because we recognize each other, we hear each other.
I think that jealous.
Yeah, a little bit. But I do think there's hope, right? I think maybe she's leading the way.
Well, she's changing the lyrics, right? I mean, right. Every small action creates a ripple, right? So even my pinned tweet, I'm not saying that I'm going to try to connect with thousands of people and change thousands of people, even if I change one person's mind. And I've had situations where I changed one person's mind, and they DM'd me and apologized for the behavior. And I was like, all I'm trying to get you to do is just to listen to what I'm saying and try to understand what I'm saying, and to treat me with respect versus, calling me names. And after 2 or 3 tweets, he finally came around, and then he DM'd me with a really long apology. I was like, wow, okay, it works as long as, but it's hard, right? But even that one person makes a big difference, and it makes a ripple. And that's why I'm trying to make this effort to do that, because, and again, I understand we're not going to get everybody, but if we get like a small percent of people to move in a certain direction towards more compassion, empathy, and understanding, I think it's going to make the world a better place. And that's why it's my pinned tweet.
I think I speak for Allie too. We completely agree with you on that. And we are not going to apologize for being a small podcast. If we change, because we can easily change one out of our 3 listeners' lives. We can be a force for good. And that's you just want to orient yourself in the right direction, and people are going to make mistakes. How you gracefully respond to those mistakes, I think is critical. So
Bobby, I learned so much today. I really appreciate it. I think you left us being a little more empathetic. I love your the 3 questions to ask around empathy. I will post that because I just think it's so valuable. And you're amazing. Like, I love what you're doing. I love the shirt. I love your message. And was so thrilled when you said you'd be on our call. And I don't think there's anything here to cancel you over.
No, I didn't screw up. Talk to my daughter.
So. Okay, your daughter might have. Hopefully, she doesn't listen.
She probably thought you were being too easy on me.
No, it was great. I mean, this is a great conversation. It left me wanting more. I want to keep talking.
Well, we can
do it again.
We'd love to have you come talk to Allison too, if you want to talk about religion sometime.
Sure. I mean, I've always had. I could tell a story how I met a Jehovah's Witness and had a long conversation for an hour. So.
Oh really? We need to.
I have those situations where because I always welcome conversation. I learned that from my dad actually, and so I think that these are really good conversations to have. And I really enjoyed the conversation. And the shirt was random. I just happened to bring it today. It wasn't planned. It wasn't planned for this, but it's been great. So thanks so much. I enjoyed hearing from both of you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate having you on. Until next time.
Peace, brother.
Awesome. Thanks.